Thanks, Sylvia.
We are live. There we go. There he is.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, everybody.
All good. So we're just waiting for everybody to join us. I'm looking forward to 2022 when we actually see people in human form. Next one. Let's at least make a slight promise that next one is human form.
We might need to still do the webinar plus human form.
Our numbers are going up, Graham, so that's good.
That's good.
Graham, would you like to start?
Yep.
I think we're
Okay.
good to go.
Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the SHTM alumni event. Thank you all for joining us across the world. We've got people from all over joining and a few more joining as we go. It's fantastic to see, actually just looking through the names, to see some people that I recognize and to see alumni. So thank you very much for joining us. We have a wonderful panel of speakers today, and thank you very much to our panelists for your time in speaking to our former students and some current students as well. Thank you very much to the organisers of these events. And so even though we're online, and normally when we've done these in person, there's a glass of champagne or something very nice to accompany it. So all I've got is a dull glass of water. I promise it's water, but Sylvia was just saying before we came on air about how nice it would be to do these things in person again, and we certainly look forward to doing these in person. But even the online versions take no little organising too. Thank you to Sylvia and Anise and colleagues for your work putting this together. My name's Graham Miller. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor of the University. I'm also a former Head of School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, and indeed I am an alumni of the school as well, so in a very happy position to be able to open this and to welcome everybody. I'll just say a few words about the university more broadly. It's clearly been a very difficult year, very difficult 18 months. It probably goes without saying. Trying to change a university almost literally overnight when we've got 16, 17,000 students is no easy thing to do. We have largely got our students back on campus now. We've resumed face-to-face classes. We still have recorded lectures. So the lectures that you would remember from your days of everybody being crammed into a smelly room, those have gone, and we record our lectures instead. But all the seminars, the workshops, all the discursive element of study is face-to-face. And that's a really positive, and the students are reacting to that really nicely. And we're actually seeing very low levels of infection here on campus. And the students have been very responsible with high levels of vaccination and behaving themselves for the most part, at least in a sensible way. We have seen a few interesting changes and things that give us some immediate pause for thought. So many of you will remember the third year, which is an industrial placement. We're seeing a significant drop in the number of students who choose to take a placement. And that's not just in hospitality and tourism, not just across the whole university, but indeed across the whole sector. We're seeing fewer students go out on placement. And we think that's because students have largely been locked up for the last 2 years. And if they go to work for a company now, there's a good chance that that will be working remotely. So working at home, locked in their bedrooms again, and the prospect of that feels quite unappealing. So students preferring to continue being face-to-face with people and engaging. And also I think they've recognized it's a really hot labor market at the moment, and their ability to get jobs is strong. And so the value added of a year in industry for their employability is probably not so much as it was before, when it was more difficult to fight for a job. So some of those things are interesting trends as to how much they will continue. Clearly, the international engagement has taken a hit as well, and that's difficult for us to do. Although we have done some, what we've called internationalization at home, where we've used the technology to link up our modules with students at Temple University in Philadelphia, with Wollongong University in Australia. And so our students will study the same thing at the same time with joint classes. And that at least allows us to encourage some sort of internationalization without being able to get on a plane rather. More longer term, we've got to think about, what does the future of the way we teach look like? How much online are we going to be providing? Do we offer everything in a fully flexible way? Are we going to set our stall out and say we're a face-to-face university? We've got a beautiful campus. We want people to come here and study. There will be some online as well, but we're essentially a face-to-face university. Or are we going to do the continuation of what we've done up till now, which is largely operate online, maybe with a little bit of face-to-face to augment it? So there's some big strategic decisions for this university, and indeed for the whole sector, to contemplate as to what form of education we will offer into the future. Beyond COVID, the university is committed to be carbon neutral, net carbon zero by 2030. We were the second university in the country to make that commitment. Cambridge beat us to the punch, unfortunately, but second university in the country, and we're now seeing a range of universities following that. So it's good that we took that real leadership position in making that commitment early. And we've got some exciting plans of how we do that, which includes the creation of our own solar farm here on campus, which will allow us to generate all of our energy needs through renewable means, but also to begin selling that back to the grid and selling that back to Guildford. So we actually become net energy positive. There's other big things, the things we were worrying about before COVID. Brexit clearly continues to be a challenge for us. Where our students came from, we had a lot of European students, we had a lot of European staff, and we had a lot of European research money. And so those have all taken a hit, and we need to work on replacements for those. And then the ongoing relations with China need constant monitoring, and the geopolitics of the relationships between the two countries, the UK and China, given the large number of Chinese students that we have into the university, and specifically into hospitality and tourism management. So there is no shortage of stuff to be working on at the moment, and it's what makes the job very enjoyable, but somewhat exhausting. We do, though, have a fantastic new head of school, and you can tell she's new because she's smiling. So I have huge pleasure to introduce to you Professor Siadia, who started as head of school just recently. Like the start of many good relationships, I met Ys in a dark corner of a bar in Florida, actually, we met. And I thought I was just amazed by Ys right from the get-go, and thought this is someone we absolutely have to have at the university. She just recently has become a highly cited academic, which puts her in the top 0.1% of cited academics in the world. So is a considerable force as an academic, an absolute whirlwind of energy and ideas. There's not many people who do me for energy and enthusiasm, but I would concede defeat to Ys very readily on that. And I'm very confident that we've got a strong leader of hospitality and tourism management school for many years to come. So I'm very pleased to introduce to you Professor Ys Siadia. And with that, hopefully slightly embarrassing introduction, Ys, I will hand over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. I didn't expect. But anyway, welcome to the second installment of the Shtm alumni webinar. So we did this in March this year, I remember, because we wanted to do something with alumni, but we couldn't get together. And I remember that time we promised that the next one is going to be in person, by the end of the year. And unfortunately, we can't do that this time. But I'm really happy that we are all here again, despite still digital. So I have. So Sylvia, thank you for organizing this, and also the advancement team. But Sylvia gave me about 10 minutes or less to do this, and for me, to discipline myself, I created a slideshow. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will work. All right, so all right, so this is us behind the cover. But let's remove that. And so this is us, the entire school. We got together in September to do a strategy day. And as an outcome of that, we do now have a new strategy. And before I start with this strategy, what we did during that strategy day was also summarizing what we have done in the past year, in the academic year of 2020 and 2021. The outcome of that is a book. We call it the Annual State of the School. It is available online. I will send the link to all the alumni from the school after this webinar, and the team in advancement will also send the link, I think, in the next installment of Christmas message. So we are very proud of what we have accomplished last year, but we are also very excited of what we can do in the coming academic year, or in this academic year. And with that, we came up with new strategy for the next 3 years, so from 2021 to 2024. I know this is long, lots of text, but I think I would just like to highlight a few things. The key phrases for us in terms of where we want to be in the next 3 years is to be transformational in our education and in our research. And that is applying the approach of change makers. And so we would like to cultivate leaders and change makers that will shape the future of the industry, and that we do impactful research. And so we have sets of strategies of how we think we can get there in the next 3 years. What's new? We shared this last time that we are about at the time to launch the MSc in International Hospitality Management with Digital Innovation. Well, we did launch the program. We do have our first set of cohorts taking MSc in IHM with digital innovation. And actually one of the speakers today, Rob, has also given a guest lecture in the program, which was very fascinating. And that's why we want him to speak again to everyone today. Next, this semester, these are our executives in residence, and this is also the initiative that Sylvia is leading as well. So we have Marilee Carr representing the hospitality industry, and we have Anita Mendireta representing the tourism side. They are this semester's executives in residence, and they have been engaged in giving guest lectures, consultation with students, and so on and so forth. And Sylvia has also put together with Leon, our director of employability, the employability afternoon one day with some of our speakers as well. And then again, as last semester, this semester, we also have 2 recipients of the Savoy Educational Trust scholarships. Lydia Clark-Sutton and Greg Staunton are both recipients of the Savoy Educational Trust Scholarship. And Greg will actually speak today as the winner of the Innovation Challenge, which I will introduce a little bit later. What do I have next? Sorry, go back. So for everybody, please find us online. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We would like for everyone to engage with the school and to get updates on all kinds of activities that we do, whether it's related to students or employability and also other socials. What's new in terms of online community, we just selected, I think, social ambassadors, what we call them. So these are students from different programs who will lead the community activities, social activities, and also social media content. And so you will see, if you follow our social channels, you will see contents provided by our social ambassadors as well. So lastly, to introduce Greg, first of all, in September, we launched this Innovation Challenge in celebration of the World Tourism Day on the 27th of September. The World Tourism Day theme was about tourism for inclusive growth. So this challenge, the Innovation Challenge theme was about nobody's left behind. So it's about making tourism, hospitality, events, and the transport industries more inclusive. So we work together with the research centers within the school, as well as our partners, STR, Institute of Hospitality, Visit Britain, and it's a penalty. And we invite entries from all SHTM students with innovative ideas of how to make our industry more inclusive. And I'm happy to announce that the winner of the SHTM award for overall innovation is Greg Staunton, who is studying MSc in Strategic Hotel Management, who is also the Savoy Trust Scholars. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I will invite Greg to present his entry, to the winning entry of the Innovation Challenge. Greg.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ys, and thank you very much, Sylvia, for being my partner in crime today with Zoom. Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to be with you all here today on Zoom on the alumni reception. It's a big opportunity for me to share with you some of the research which I've been working on for the last few months, especially with this Innovation Award. And the sort of context I just wanted to sort of set the scene a little bit with the research is surrounding inclusion. And what we're finding at the second, there's been a lot of fantastic developments and advancements, especially with some subgroups within the sort of inclusion umbrella. There's a really good sort of positive movement within the BAME and the group within the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. So I wanted to look more towards LGBTQ+ community. So did you want me to share my screen for the slides? Yeah. Give me 1 second. Cool. So I hope you can all see this. Okay, so sort of to set the scene, obviously you can see different images on the screen in front of you. Take a look at them for a second. And then if I go next screen, you can almost see the differences almost immediately in the images that we're showing you. And the sort of question I wanted to sort of put out to you, do these images look as familiar as ones on the first page? Probably not. We don't see these sort of images as much. So this was the sort of sounding context for my research, which is, this is the research question here. And just to, again, set the scene, we're just looking at imagery in terms of how destinations are marked, and is it sustainable, and does it actually exclude anyone within the LGBTQ+ community. Okay, so what I'm not going to do just on this session, I'm not going to obviously list sort of identities that you'll find within the community, but for those interested in improving their knowledge, I'm more than happy to share some relevant resources. What I really wanted to get across to you all after my presentation today is that the actions and ideas which I'll outline are not solely exclusive to tourism. As an industry, they can be reapplied across different industries. So a little bit about the research, and I'm applying this research to the Caribbean as a destination. Over 10% of global travelers are identified as an LGBTQ+ individual. So that's a total cost of 10 billion per year of total travelers. And that's quite a substantial amount, I think we'll all agree. Now, there's an over-reliance and concentration of marketing campaigns on the market at the second, which are used to market a tourism destination, which are only appealing and attracting atypical heterosexual couples. Now, if we consider the Caribbean as a destination, the LGBTQ+ tourism discrimination costs the picturesque island over 4.2 billion per year in revenue, which contributes to 5.2% of annual GDP growth. So the question I want to put across to you all here is in terms of, do we need to remap the Kotler's 4 Ps framework to suit this sub-majority within the LGBTQ+ community? Most likely. And you'll all have seen the change in social media platforms, users using pronouns more. Again, I won't sort of list those ones, but you can sort of, the idea for that is we're trying to use pronouns to ensure acceptance across all platforms. And the stereotype we often come across is when we're looking at somebody's profile on social media, and we immediately associate them as a member of the LGBTQ+ community, just if they've got pronouns. Now, that's a stereotype I'm always looking to challenge, because there's many people out there, for example, who are proactively using pronouns, and they're actually just advocates and almost allies of the community. And they're just doing that to show awareness of it. So it's a really cost-free, viable solution we can all do. And if you're interested in more resources, drop me a message and I can definitely share more of those with you. Let's go to the next screen. So in terms of responsibility and actors within tourism, you've got some big names down the bottom of the screen. And what I've done, I've just bullet pointed in terms of responsibilities, but I'm placing most emphasis on marketeers of the future. There needs to be much more collaboration with key players within the service industries, be it hotels, be it airlines, on producing inclusive content which doesn't always attract, for example, as I've mentioned before, atypical heterosexual individuals and stuff, because it's very detrimental to others. Because if they see, your typical white happy couple who are honeymooning on the Caribbean, and then they look and you've got a same-sex couple, for example, looking at that destination, it's not until you dig further and go through reports where you'll find related discrimination on the island. So what I propose is, the idea is to partner with a not-for-profit or a non-governmental organization such as LGBT Foundation. They're the leading foundation within the US, so they would cover that bit of coverage within the world, being in the Caribbean. Just like us is a UK-based charity who works solely to partner with secondary schools, colleges, universities to deliver training on language, imagery, and the importance of safeguarding students of the future. They focus within the 15 to 25 age group. And what they do, they actually recruit ambassadors who can volunteer either remotely, in person, and give talks on what it's like growing up as an individual within the LGBTQ+ community. Tour operators, there's some really good examples we're seeing at the second. TUI and Kuoni are the only tour operators at the second who actually make mandatory LGBTQ+ training for all of their holiday makers in the stores on the high street when they're selling same-sex holidays to make them more comfortable. And just to go back to the education point, it's a sort of group within tourism which could very, very much easily be incorporated into modules students take if they're taking tourism management at a higher education, or if it's just travel and tourism, your BTEC diplomas at a local college. But I think what I wanted to really reinforce was we all have a responsibility to be more conscious and aware of how our perceptions of the community could impact others without even noticing. And I think that's about it. So I'm more than happy to leave my details in the chat. I can leave my email address if any of you would like to find out more resources. And I will stop sharing and say thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Greg. It makes us all proud, especially the ones that have seen your growth through your undergrad and now through your postgrad, to see such innovation, such creativity, and something so vitally important to have inclusion in such a global industry. Thank you so much. You make us all proud, Greg. Which I've told you many, many times before. But again, for anybody that wants Greg's details, please feel free to touch base with us. We'll be happy to share his contact details. Now, welcome to our alumni again. It's lovely to really see a lot of you here, particularly if recent graduates. From the names I'm seeing on the attendees, there's a lot of recent graduates, which I'm loving seeing. So welcome back. Hopefully we'll see you in face-to-face form soon in 2022. The topic today is harnessing digital innovation, harnessing digital transformation for innovation. It's a lot of words there. We felt that it was a particularly interesting topic to us, especially with the creativity that the industry had to go through in the last couple of years, and we're still going through. And not to mention our own experts in the field within our school. So it became 1 + 1 = 2 when we came to the topic. But enough from me. I really wanted to play Eye of the Tiger at this stage, Rob, but I will control myself. I would like to introduce our first guest speaker, Rob Liddiard, who is the CEO and co-founder of Yapster. Just a snapshot of Rob, who started his journey of life, or life journey, as in law, and was probably, I'd say, a curious character, and was probably felt an overwhelming passion or curiosity about innovation, and stepped out of law and has found a new career path. After speaking with our students and hearing about how wonderful he was with our students and the feedback we got, we couldn't resist but invite him onto our alumni webinar today. So Rob, thank you for sharing your passion with our students, and thank you for sharing your passion with our alumni today. And I leave the floor to you.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you.
I control the Eye of the Tiger.
It was very cool. I feel a bit bad that I have to follow Greg. Greg, that was awesome as well. I learned a lot. So thank you for letting me sit in. So hello, everybody. I can see some faces on screen, but not all. Now, I've actually never used the raise hand option at the bottom of Zoom, so this might not work at all, but can we just try it, just so I can get a sense? Can anybody that's on the call that either is or would like to be an entrepreneur at some point in their career, can you just hit the raise hand button so I can just get a feel? Because it doesn't matter if none of you are interested in entrepreneurship. Hopefully you'll still get something from this talk, but I'd just love to know how many actual or aspiring entrepreneurs I'm talking to. So please hit raise hand if that applies to you. Okay, right, cool. Okay. So we've got a handful of we've got a handful of pain-seeking entrepreneurs that I'm going to try and dissuade over the next 20 minutes. And then everybody else is probably going to end up potentially at some point in their career working for a crazy entrepreneur. So either way, you'll hopefully get some value from this. But that's helpful to know. Okay, thank you. So, so as Sylvia says, my name's Rob Liddiard. I founded a company called Yapster. I founded it in 2015, actually, with someone that sat next door, Craig. He's the brains of the operation, so he's the software engineer. And as Sylvia says, I'm a reformed corporate lawyer. Now, the topic of this talk is all about innovation. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about the Yapster platform. I'm going to talk about my journey to this point and the understanding of innovation that I now have, and hopefully that you can then take forward into your own careers, either entrepreneurial careers or corporate sort of employed careers. You still need to innovate. So 1 minute on Yapster, so you know what the actual business is, so you don't get too bored of my life story. So Yapster's a mobile app that people working in hospitality download onto their personal devices so that they can engage in secure, real-time, two-way communication with each other in a property or a bar or a restaurant, but also to be able to have authentic digital connections with the leadership of their brands. So for example, we work with Nobu hotels around the world, a few of the UK hotel groups as well, like Ferndale Hotel, some of the intercontinental group hotels as well, Atlas Hotels, Bulgari Hotel in London, and then a whole bunch of restaurant organizations as well. In all of those businesses, what they have in common is 80% of the people working in those roles don't have a corporate email address, a company email address. So of course, we've got lots of fabulous alumni on the call. I hope some of you either are or are joining the hospitality industry now. You may have been given corporate emails, but I bet a lot of your colleagues, particularly working on the front line, delivering the customer experience, probably don't have a company email address, right? So the question is, how do you actually reach those people to deliver your strategy, your mission, your culture, your vision? It's actually really difficult. We're actually reduced to just putting posters on staff room doors in 2021, right? It's absurd. So what Yapster does is it creates a secure mobile network to link those colleagues to each other and to the company. That's all we do. Now, how I got to Yapster from being a lawyer is, I think, the more interesting story. Great. Okay. So, and also please do use the Q&A as we go as well. And I'll try and answer questions either at the end or when Sylvia or at least tell me that I can. So that'll be helpful so I can see. And also call BS if I say anything you don't agree with. You won't offend me. After 6 years as an entrepreneur, I've got skin like a rhino. Right. So innovation. The key message of my talk, if you want to go make a cup of coffee and not listen to any more of it now, that you'll get all of the value from this statement. In my opinion, the best innovation happens on your doorstep. Okay, so the greatest opportunities for innovation in your life are probably already within your metaphorical view, or maybe even your physical view, right? You're very likely for the greatest innovation that you can contribute to your business or society. It's likely to be something that you personally know deeply, either now or at some future point in your career. Make sense? Now, for a lot of us that have never practiced innovation, we've never been entrepreneurs before, what a lot of us do is we lunge, we jump around from opportunity to opportunity looking for innovation, because the word innovation makes us think, in order to innovate, I have to do something crazy. I have to do something outside of the ordinary. I have to do something exceptional to catch the lightning that is innovation. We've got a doctor that has corrected me. A rhino is actually quite sensitive, so I like it. You're standing up to me already. Good. Please carry on. So with that in mind, what I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to give you some examples of my entrepreneurial journey into hospitality technology from where I started, so you can have a laugh at some of my terrible business attempts prior to Yapster. And I hope what you'll take away from this is some inspiration to look for innovation where you are today, rather than dreaming about being somebody else somewhere else thinking I'm going to innovate tomorrow when lightning strikes me. Right? Innovation is something that everybody can think about and practice. You don't need to wait to get hit by lightning. Right. So my story then. So I wasn't born as a lawyer. I was born as a kid in Essex, for those of you that know, like, so sort of in the same M25 London motor, sort of the motorway that encircles London. Surrey's the nice bit. Essex is sort of to the east and is not quite as nice as Surrey. We do have a university, but so I grew up in a place called Essex. My mum was a secretary to an accountant. My mum's dream for me was always to be her boss. It's a very, very common thing. Those of you that have got kids, right? You sort of aspire for your children to have the best that you've seen in life. My mum was no different. So she worked for an accountant. So she loved the idea of me being a professional services person, a partner in an accounting firm or a law firm. So I wasn't a particularly bright kid. So I went to a normal school, but she sent me to Saturday school and made me listen to multiplication tables in the car, to tennis or swimming or whatever it is that she was getting me to do. And eventually I started working in retail, and that was in the late 90s. And I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And one day I was selling jeans in Gap, which is not as cool now as it was in the late 90s. But in the late 90s, that was kind of a badass job in the local shopping center. So I was selling jeans in Gap, and this guy was coming through, and he was waiting to get, like, his wife was buying a pair of jeans. He was bored out of his mind, and I started like talking to him. So I should have known I was going to be in sales then, actually, but I drifted into law because it turns out this guy was a lawyer, right? And my mum had raised me to be like super ambitious and pushy. And so when I found out this guy was a lawyer, I got his business card. And I wrote to him, and he ended up helping me become a lawyer because he taught me the universities that law firms recruit from. I then went to one of those universities. I stayed in touch. He sort of taught me the graduate selection process. I still had to do the interviews and stuff, but I definitely had a helping hand, right? So first innovation lesson there: selling jeans, meet a lawyer, become a lawyer. Okay, it's kind of luck, but it's also circumstantial. If it had been a banker that had gone through, or a clown, I could have been something completely different. But it happened to be a lawyer that came through my Gap fitting room. So I go off and become a lawyer, and I work my ass off to become a lawyer. And then I do eventually become a lawyer, and I realized that I hate being a lawyer, right? I suck at it. I'm quite good at talking my way into a law firm, but actually not that good at doing legal work, because the personality type that's required to be a fantastic lawyer is somebody that is very attentive to the details, very organized, likes to get things right, whereas I like to do things fast, right? Then, you know, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. I'm not going to give you an animal example for like a fast animal, because Ionis is going to correct me. But so anyway, I'm just in the job it's a job that wasn't right for me. But one of the things that was cool about it is you saw lots of entrepreneurs coming through my law firm, right? Because entrepreneurs consume professional services, banking and accounting and legal services. So cheetah, yeah. So I'm more of a cheetah than an owl, maybe. Sorry, I was reading the Q&A there. So I see entrepreneurs coming through my law firm, and I'm like, wow, they all look like they're having more fun than me. They haven't worked as hard, seemingly, like, you know, studying to get these jobs. Like, they just seem to have started these companies. So that looks cool as hell. I fancy doing that. And this is, and that was around 2009. I qualified in 2008. I did a year afterwards as a lawyer, 2009. And at this point, I impulsively give up my job as a lawyer, which again is an indicator that I wasn't a good lawyer. A good lawyer would never do that, right? I just jumped and quit because I thought I want to do something else. And this is really where my innovation experience sort of began. And I actually didn't realize the education that I was having, because what happened first is I left, and then I was like, crap, I actually do need to pay my rent. Like, what am I going to do now? And I started like applying for jobs in things that seemed sort of cool. Like, I'd reached out to a couple of startups, and none of them really wanted me, because I was doing that thing that I'm trying to talk you out of doing in this talk. I was jumping around. I was just picking random things that I didn't know anything about, like financial technology, for example. And people would take meetings with me, but like, they're like, dude, you're a lawyer. Like, why don't you go be a lawyer? Like, what the hell do you know about this thing that you're asking me to come into my business? What value can you possibly add, right? And what eventually happened is I fell into to legal technology, right? Because I actually understood law, but the legal industry was deregulating, and technology was coming into the legal industry at that time. And so what happened is it turned out that technology companies found it very difficult to communicate the value of their products to law firms, right? Because lawyers are arrogant and intelligent and risk averse and slow. And so they never do anything like in terms of procuring these new software products. So it turned out that I actually was uniquely qualified, or not uniquely, but I was in a small talent pool of people that were qualified lawyers but didn't want to be a lawyer. And so these legal technology companies were able to use me to present their solutions to the legal profession. And that actually was really quite successful. Like, I ended up brokering some fairly significant deals between legal technology companies and law firms, between outsourcing companies. I did a lot of legal outsourcing from Manila and from South Africa, places where you had very, very good legal talent, but an exchange rate that meant that the UK and American clients could effectively pay market rate in those jurisdictions for legal services, but actually get the benefit of the wage arbitrage because of the difference in the currencies. So it's a bit technical, but that I was successful in. Now, unfortunately, I was too stupid to understand that the reason I'd been successful in that is because I was experiencing a changing trend, i.e. the digitization of law, and something that I actually knew about, being a lawyer, right? And so it was much, much easier to innovate at that intersection of the new and the familiar. So guess what I did next? I started a Ghanaian street food business. Kid from Essex that's a lawyer turned technology salesman. You know what would be a rational pivot? Why don't you go and start cooking African stews in East London? That is a recipe for success, clearly. Now, needless to say, that was an utter disaster because I don't know anything about building a consumer brand. I don't know anything about waste management. I don't know anything about all the things that virtually everybody on this call knows more than me about. And yet I jumped because I still wanted to start something truly myself, whereas obviously in the legal technology space, I was just doing deals that were brokering other technology companies' transactions. That it wasn't my technology company, right? I was a sort of gun for hire salesperson. But I didn't know how to start a technology company. So rather than just slowing down and doing the hard yards of going to work in a legal technology company, then learning how to raise money, and then starting a legal technology business in a space where my network would have told me there were opportunities, I just jumped out and went and created this random failing food business and stood outside in the snow and the rain, losing, ultimately thousands of pounds, which is not that much money in the world of startups, but it's a lot of money when it's coming out of your pocket and you've only got a few £1,000s in the bank to begin with. Okay. So after that, I eventually sold all of the assets in that, recognized that it was actually like I was working for way, way below minimum wage. I was working for negative wage. So I ended that. And then what I did is I came back and I again started doing a sort of advisory business connected to the legal industry. And you're picking up a trend now, right? Like, have a big dream, do something, fail, go and make some money doing something that feels familiar to you, then try another crazy dream, fail, then come back to the thing that's familiar to you, okay? So I started a business in legal technology, legal marketing, sorry. And so what I'd found from my prior experience selling legal software, I realized that it was really difficult to market to lawyers, to create demand for services, because lawyers sell their time. So it turns out it's quite difficult to get a lawyer to spend an hour with you, because they can bill that hour for like $1,000 to some poor client, right? So if you want to get them to invest an hour in you, they think of it as £1,000 of their money that they're giving you to take the meeting. So the insight was actually, if we can help build marketing services for businesses that want to sell, either law firms that want to sell to corporate legal departments or legal technology companies that want to sell to lawyers, that might be interesting. And so I started that business and I started to get some work in. I hired a couple of marketeers that were doing sort of digital marketing, and that sort of worked. The challenge there was that I realized I didn't actually have any passion for creating marketing content. And so the work just felt hard. You know, like I knew a bit about it because I knew the legal industry, but I wasn't passionate about marketing. And so it's very difficult for me to become truly a subject matter expert. And again, to drive true innovation, sometimes you can do that opportunistically if you're just going to import and export something and it's not your product. But if you're going to actually create something, usually you need to be sufficiently passionate about it to develop a unique insight that then you can monetize and you can scale up and you can teach other people. If you're always bringing in the specialists, then most of the value is probably going to accrue to those specialists. You're just going to end up keeping that fairly small margin, which then makes hard work feel even harder. I'm sorry, this has been a very long story, but I hope it's useful. I'm going to come to the punchline in a minute. What we did then next is, as I was doing the legal marketing, I was obviously meeting lots of companies that buy legal services, right? And other than my failed Ghanaian street food business, remember, I haven't said hospitality yet, and I've spent the last 6 years selling technology to hospitality. So you're thinking, how has this cowboy ended up running a business in hospitality? And I'm about to tell you. In legal marketing, I was meeting all of these big companies, including major retailers and major restaurants, because the big companies are the ones that spend the most on legal services. So if you've got a legal marketing business, the people you're trying to influence are the companies that spend the most money. And during the course of that, I found out that Marks and Spencer's, the big British retailer, had 85,000 employees, but only 15,000 company email addresses, right? And so I was like, well, how do you speak to the other 70,000 people? Like, I don't get it. Like, how can you deliver a business plan when 8 out of every 10 people that work for you can't receive your information? Like, your strategy is clearly nonsense, right? If you're just paying some management consulting firm £1 million to write your strategy and then nobody learns about it, you're in trouble. And so it was from there I started doing some market research with the legal department and saying, like, have you heard about these data protection changes in Europe? Like, do you think it's okay that the whole business runs on WhatsApp? Like, you know, if Sylvia creates a WhatsApp group and puts us all in it, she's going to give me all of your personal phone numbers. Like, don't know if that's cool or not, right? Probably not. And that was how we started doing the market testing. And then and then I called my now co-founder, Craig, and said, Craig, I think half the economy runs on WhatsApp. Like, that sounds like an easy thing to rival. Should we just have a go at that? So there was still a little bit of the Ghanaian street food entrepreneur in me. And so we raised a bit of seed capital that I don't have time to take you into today. And we built what became the first Yapster product. And the access point to hospitality was not that I'd ever worked in hospitality, but I'd obviously been a customer of hospitality. So it was something that I did actually know deeply, albeit from the customer side rather than the employee side. And because I'd sold legal technology, it was fairly easy for me to offer a regulatory product. That's what Yapster started as, a product that, sorry, there's a traffic jam outside my office. Because it started as a regulatory product, it was easy for me to sell to walk into a restaurant, get a feel for it, find out who the boss of that restaurant was, and then communicate to them and say, do you know your business is running on WhatsApp? I think that's something that we can solve. We can reduce regulatory risk, and also we can help you be a better company by making it easier for you to communicate within that business. And what it ultimately did is it brought together all of my prior history with something that I was actually passionate about, which is leadership. Right? Like, the reason I'm here speaking to you is that, like, you're the leaders of the industry that I serve. You're the leaders of the future. I'm passionate about the development of leadership in a sector that I'm passionate about, right? So we want to pay it forward. So suddenly now I'm selling this boring GDPR compliant messaging service to leaders, and it becomes a leadership platform. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, suddenly the CEO can make every single person in the business feel like they matter, because they do matter. And I can tell that story to investors and keep raising capital. And then I can keep selling that to more hospitality companies, hire more people, get more money, build more software, sell more of it. And it starts to incrementally climb. I just wish it didn't take me 15 years along the journey. Okay, so each of you will get there, no matter how clumsy your path, because entrepreneurs usually don't take advice anyway, so I won't be offended if you don't take mine. But if you want to save yourself the 10 years of misery and failure that I had, what I suggest you do is, after this session, look around you at the things you know best, work out where there's demand for the things you know best, keep making connections on the edge of your existing world, make connections with the technology providers that are supplying your market, make connections with the supply chain to your market, talk to different departments in your organization and try and form connections at the edge of your experience. And what you'll find is you're way more likely to deliver innovation. That is actually how innovation tends to happen in industry. It isn't catching lightning in a bottle. So you don't need to feel bad if you don't have any life-changing ideas like today at your desk. You just have to get out into the world and they will find you. So I hope that wasn't too preachy, and I hope that was about the right amount of time, Sylvia. We've got a couple of questions, but was that okay?
Yeah, I think there's a question for you about why it was called Yapster, or where the name Yapster is originated from.
Again, look, I'm glad you asked that, because again, I have no creative insights. Okay, where the name Yapster came from is we actually incorporated the company as Employee Republic, which is not a very good name. It was about democratizing decision making, securing the work-life balance and the personal data of the employees in these frontline industries. But it turns out that when we built the software, people needed to remember it in some faraway restaurant from head office. And so it needed to be something they would remember. And so we were just like, well, we want it to be we want it to be a verb, you know, like to Google. And we're like, okay, well, what's a verb for talking? You know, and can't say chat because that isn't brandable. So we're going through and we're like, okay, yap, yappy dogs, that's kind of annoying, right? Like, do we want to associate with yappy dogs? Not sure. And then a designer we were working with drew the little like dog speech bubble for the eye, right? The patch-eyed dog with the speech bubble. And we're like, oh, I love that icon though. I love that icon to yap. Yeah, kind of makes sense. And then I started using it in some sort of pitches. And I said Yapster at the beginning of a presentation only once, and then I presented for another 25 minutes. And as you all now know, I'm quite difficult to follow because I get excited and jump all over the place. And then at the end of this presentation, the customer called it Yapster, and I'd said it once 25 minutes ago. I'm like, dude, that's interesting. Like, if we need people a long way away that don't care much about our software to remember the name of it, like that's kind of an indicator that this might be the thing. And so we tried it. People kept saying it. We liked the logo and we carried on. I'd love to tell you that it was some grand creative vision, but again, it was incremental innovation, trying things at the edge of where we was at the time.
Oh, somebody's asking you about your moment of truth, Rob.
So we're not at a million users. We're at like just over 100,000. So relatively, like still relatively modest. We're quite a small business. Like we're a small business for the size of customers that we work with. The moment of truth for me, well, COVID. Yeah, it says, I think it said 80,000 there, Hannah. So yeah, so it's gone over that. Just the website's out of date. Thank you for giving me an appropriate grilling today. Yeah, it's I think it's about 110 or something now. Yeah, I mean, in coronavirus, like, you know, we were like a lot of technology companies, we'd raised money, we were loss-making, deliberately loss-making in the pursuit of growth. And then every single one of our customers went to zero cash flow all at the same time because they shut their doors and they were not paying their bills voluntarily. Right? They stopped paying their rent, they stopped paying their suppliers, they stopped paying everyone just to survive. And you got this quite big team reliant on customer income plus investor reserves. And you're like, do we believe in this enough to do layoffs? Do we believe in this enough to, you know, to run this business on a sort of like skeleton basis, protecting the cash as much as we can to survive until the market rebounds? And we're actually a much better business for coming out of it. But most businesses face those moments of truth where you're facing sort of near death, usually not because of a global sector depression, but that was really ours. It's been good for us actually in the end. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
And then there's a question from Julian.
Yes, so the question is, you focus on hospitality and retail. Sounds like Yapster could be leveraged in all sorts of market segments. What are your expansion plans? So as I've explained to you during this talk, I believe the best innovation, the greatest growth happens at the edge of where you are. I actually think it's a lack of discipline and strategic thinking to keep jumping around, because at that point you're taking bets. Are we gamblers or are we entrepreneurs? Are we business executives, right? Like, I don't think we're gamblers. It's all about actually mitigating and managing and understanding risk, and then taking calculated risks in pursuit of growth. So for me, the way I think about it is like, it's easier to build a dominant brand the more narrowly that you define your target market. Yeah, if you understand your ideal customer profile and you build a dominant position there, that then enables you to accumulate the resources to then broaden your scope. So we actually, I mean, I got an inbound inquiry from a hospital, a health trust yesterday. We've been getting more and more inbound from facilities companies as well that do like cleaning and maintenance and things. And I think that's because, you know, our strapline is take the lead. We want to be the Nike of leadership. So you know how Nike sells trainers by celebrating the world's best male and female tennis players and the fastest runners and the most inspiring soccer players and so on. We want to be that for frontline leadership. So we want the most kick-ass leaders in our addressable markets to choose Yapster to tell their story and deliver their vision. Because other people in industry want to follow the most inspiring leaders they know of, right? Like, everybody likes to be inspired. And so what we're finding is that by focusing on celebrating those leaders, they're then taking us more further afield, and actually innovators from neighboring sectors are coming on and pulling us into their sector, because they're saying, I know you're not marketing to me, but your mission is speaking to me, and I would like you to come and innovate with me in this neighboring space. The risk of that is we may be outcompeted by a more aggressive rival that has our same value proposition, that goes in and becomes the Yapster of facilities, or the Yapster of cleaning or contract services or transport. But that's a risk I'm willing to take in pursuit of this steady, long-term innovation.
There's a question from Sikrimante with regards to expanding into unrelated areas.
So, yeah, so same answer really. So like, entrepreneurship, innovation is a very personal thing. You'll be more, in my opinion, you'll be more successful if you do what's authentic to you. So social leadership, as we practice, is all about authentic, accessible leadership. If it's authentic to you to fight on multiple fronts, then that should be your strategy. As long as you execute it with conviction. You probably have to raise a bunch of capital, hire a bunch of people to build a brand in multiple cities, almost like the Uber strategy, right? Where they land in all of these markets all at the same time and take on 50 city regulators simultaneously. You can do that, but it has to be who you are. I'm a bit more cautious than that, and so for me, like, it's just not my style of leadership to take Yapster into those unrelated spaces. I would sooner be focused on our mission and be taken into those spaces. But if a big opportunity in a neighboring sector was to come up where we were pulled into it, then we would absolutely pursue it. But I won't speculatively go into a completely different opportunity or space, because I think that's like walking around in a pitch black room looking for the light switch. Like, everybody knows what that feels like. You know, in those awesome hotels with like the blackout blinds, you can't see anything. You can't remember where the toilet is. You don't want to wake your spouse up, like kicking the bed and falling over your suitcase. I don't like that experience. Like, every entrepreneur at the beginning is struggling to find the light switch. For me, like, once you've found it and you're in a room that's light and you know where you're going, why walk into another pitch black room?
Rob, it seems when you're talking that it's a combination of hunger and passion when you are younger, but it's also finding the right time and the right place. You keep saying that you wasted 10 years, but I don't think you wasted 10 years. I think the 10 years is every year taught you something. Even the Ghanaian food experience.
That taught me respect for you guys.
Yeah, from a hotel perspective, I love the idea of Yapster, and I wish I was in a hotel using it, because running around trying to find staff members and you can't remember phone numbers or email addresses. I think it's a great piece of software.
Thank you. Well, listen, thank you for having me. Last thing, I sat next to a chap called Alan Parker, who's an alumni of your school. He was a visiting professor some time ago. He was the CEO of Whitbread in the 90s, Travel Lodge, load of other organizations. Some of you would know him. His son, Charlie, also is an alumni of your school, who's now over in Hawaii, I think. Yeah, there you go. Listen, this is an impressive audience. You are going to go on and do amazing things, right? Like, so it's a real privilege for you to be able to know who I am, know about my brand. Those of you that are into LinkedIn, please do add me on it. I would love to follow your success as the years go by.
Thank you. And you're been adopted into the school, so you're not going anywhere. So
well, I heard there's supposed to be champagne. I feel like I got like shortchanged a bit. I
promise. If I put if I have to sign off on and pretend I'm East, I'm going to sign it off.
All right, deal.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you so much for taking your time. I know your schedule today was a little bit tough, so really, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I'm signing off, but add me on LinkedIn. See you later.
Okay, take care.
Thanks. Bye.
So thank you so much for Rob for sharing his experience and his passion for innovation. Moving on, last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce one of our own alumni, Mr. Carrel Ieong, who's speaking to us from Singapore. So I've kept Carrel very late into the night. But just to introduce Carrel, he's currently the Vice President of Marketing and Communication for SGX, the Singapore Exchange. But ironically enough, very similar to Rob, Carrel started his journey in law and slowly ventured out. I don't know very slowly or very quickly, but ventured out. He joined us at Surrey for his master's degree in 2005 in tourism. And I believe he was supervised by Professor Gang, who I see is on the call or on the webinar. Following a fantastic career in digital marketing and e-commerce in hospitality and tourism. In Asia, he's now stepped out and hunting into a new sector of finance. So we've invited Carrel to speak. And just very similar to Rob in characteristics. I said this to Carrel when I met him last week, that he is a very curious character, 2 master's degrees under his belt, looking at the 3rd one, and a thirst for knowledge that I think is uncomparable to anybody I've met recently. So I'm really, really proud to welcome Carrel onto the webinar.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor and Sylvia, for having me. Such a great and warm introduction. So I'm actually not quite sure whether my dissertation professor, Professor Gang Li, is online. If he is on, I will be terribly pleased to see you, because it has been a few years since we last met in Hong Kong. I think it's back in like 2014 or 2015 or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, I'm truly honored to share my experience and thoughts on digital innovation with the alumni community tonight. I mean, afternoon or tonight, because I'm here in Singapore. Actually, it's a very casual webinar, so I don't have any slides. But to begin, maybe I should share a bit about myself. I'm Chinese, based in Singapore now. As Sylvia just mentioned, I graduated from Surrey back in 2006. So it's been more than 15 years already. With my MSc, very importantly, with distinction in tourism marketing. So I studied really, really hard. And similar to Rob, as you rightly pointed out, I also received my legal education and training with a Master of Law, also with distinction from the University of Edinburgh. So it's been a very tough journey, but super rewarding. So throughout my career, I've worked across a diverse range of industries, from travel, hospitality to casino, very interesting one, and internet startups, and now finance. So the most interesting experience of all is probably, as I mentioned, is the casino, I would say, which has spent slightly over 10 years as head of digital and e-commerce with 2 of the world's largest casino operators. One actually in Macau is called Galaxy Entertainment, which is one, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the top 3 integrated casino resort operators in terms of market cap right after the Venetian group or the Las Vegas Sands group in Las Vegas. And where I headed up the group's digital operations with full P&L responsibilities covering 6 5-star hotels with around 5,000 rooms, a shopping center, 200 plus restaurants, and a water park. And subsequently, a few years back, I joined ResourceWorks in Tulsa in Singapore, where I led the e-commerce sales and digital transformation for some of the most prominent attractions, including the Universal Studios in Singapore. So currently, I'm actually with Singapore Exchange as a VP of Marketing. Singapore Exchange is actually Asia's leading, this is a standard introduction, is a leading multi-asset market infrastructure operating many different asset classes, from securities, derivatives to fixed income. So my role is actually, I'm wearing 2 hats. First of all is digital marketing communications of our products and services, as well as the second hat is to drive the customer experience innovation through digital, I mean. So let me start. The topic today, harnessing digital transformation for innovation, is indeed extremely broad. So when I received this email from Sylvia and the team, I was actually kind of struggling because the thing is really too broad. And also digital has fundamentally challenged our conventional wisdom and revolutionized nearly every aspect of our lives. So you can imagine almost everything can be transformed technically. But broadly speaking, in my view, there are 2 key aspects. One is the internal aspect, which is what digital transformation can help improve our work processes, which means generally lower cost, better efficiency, higher productivity, fewer errors, as we do away with the manual processes as much as possible. And on the other hand, digital also enabled us to understand our customer way better than in the past. So hence the other aspect is actually for digital to power or even become an integral part of the service offerings. So with my background in digital and marketing, my day-to-day work has mostly revolved around using digital to transform customer experience, which fortunately cuts across the 2 aspects which I just mentioned. So in fact, if you look at some of the latest trends and developments on the tech front, things like cloud computing, big data, AI, they're not just buzzwords, but they have actually enabled an unprecedentedly deep understanding and also automation for our customers, which have in turn made certain things like what we call service personalization possible. What I mean by that is actually traditionally we do segmentation, right? I still remember my marketing modules. We do segmentation, and then we try to use the different segments to understand the behavior of the customers so that we can serve them better in terms of time and money and resources. But even though the segmentation from the strategic perspective is still relevant, the availability of real-time customer intelligence through the use of technology can now enable us to render service at the right time, right place, and at the right customer, basically. Meaning every individual can technically be a segment. So hence the name of service personalization. So for example, when I was with the integrated resorts in Macau and also in Singapore, I was fortunate enough to oversee and implement a we call it Customer 360 project or CRM Plus project that aimed to bring the different data in silos together and automate and shape content on our digital platforms and touch points through contextual data. So for your easy understanding, you can imagine that the different information you get on the website when you are outside of the destination versus what you get on a mobile device when you're at the destination can be slightly different. Or let's say first timer versus repeat customers to your website or to your digital channels can and should see things or different things because fundamentally they should have different needs. So speaking about this, even the same customer, at the different stages of the customer journey can also have different needs. Therefore, it is of paramount importance to understand what the customer is doing and what they really, really want, so that we can render the service and content for the best experience for them. and it's not anything very far. If you look at some of the big tech firm out there like Netflix and TikTok, this is precisely their killer formula, which has what we call employ the similar smart strategy to recommend you with the most relevant content available. So which to a large extent will also sort of fence them from other rivals. So this sort of automation and contextual personalization has in fact gone, in my experience, beyond our own channels as well, as we are living now in an omni-channel environment with fragmented channels and experiences. So for example, I'm sure many of you have the experience of searching a flight ticket online, but after a day or two, you see an ad on of the same itinerary, by the way, on your IG, on your Facebook. So even sometimes when you browse on the website, you see the same ads. So and also if you are trying to do your shopping on Amazon or in China, like Taobao, all these channels, if you drop out of an online purchase, and basically you will most likely receive an email reminding you that by the way, you haven't completed the transaction yet. The aim of this sort of communication strategy is simply to bring you back to the loop, and in order for you and to complement the communication strategy, some merchants, even I did in the past, may even give you some extra, something extra, some freebies or some coupon or something as a nudge for you to complete the transaction. So in my experience, when I was managing the attraction sales in Singapore, this sort of, we call it the retargeting strategy, can improve the ticket sales by at least 10 to 15%. So don't underestimate the benefit. Sometimes the best practice is even to employ some what we call the specific demographics or situational variables overlaid with our known behavioral data to predict what would actually work best. So for example, using an example I just given on the coupons or something I just mentioned, I personally test out the different incentives, let's say in different Asian markets, and found out that certain incentives or even content copy work way better in certain countries or even in certain cities. It's actually quite interesting. So this sort of performance and insights gained from this sort of so-called digital enabled sales strategy are truly phenomenal, which will be the real benefits that digital transformation can unlock for us. So speaking about this, some of the examples I just given mostly revolve around the online space. But apart from that, we can also see something in the offline space as well. And largely because of my experience in the casino resorts. And at this point, I have to say that casino is probably an exemplar, as it is one of the very, very few industries so obsessed with tracking, understanding, and analyzing customer behaviors using technologies. Because intelligence from such technology can help us achieve more precision targeting and performance optimization. When it comes to casino, table games, it's all about optimization. To this end, it often requires an end-to-end upgrade of digital capabilities that allow the casinos, or we call the properties, to capture and leverage data across the different touch points. In addition to the usual footfall analysis, like using cameras, I know most of the shopping malls use this kind of technology to help configure some of the setup. We also in a casino we also employ things like sensors and mobile apps carried by the customers on the gaming floor to achieve better real-time communications. So for better illustration, we can understand that most casinos have a loyalty program, for example, that come with a loyalty card usually, and an app. So customer can use the cards everywhere on the floor to collect their points and also redeem certain things. Let's say they carry the points and then go to the restaurant and eat there. So you can imagine casino can leverage these sort of location-based customer insights and customers' past behavioral patterns to push tailored real-time recommendations or even incentives to trigger certain behavior. This is indeed one of the most exciting projects I've ever participated in the past when I was in the casino world. Since I'm now in the finance world, maybe I should use some examples from finance. That there are lots of lessons to draw from. So similar transformation indeed have been seen in many subsectors within finance. So maybe I should use insurance, which is a very fantastic example. probably because of the pressure towards lower cost structures and greater agility in the insurance industry. In fact, from what I have been speaking to some of the industry practitioners in the insurance industry, I mean, in insurance industry has been rather quick at lapping up the digital transformation opportunity presented by the pandemic, probably because they can't really visit the shop front. And insurance have escalated efforts to digitize the operations and processes. So make way for new business models and deliver seamless customer experience. A few days ago, when I spoke to my industry friend in the insurance industry, so he actually told me that the emerging sort of insurtechs now offer new distribution, new risk management, or even new what we call KYC in the finance world, know your customer, and due diligence models being adopted by the existing issuers and new entrants to shorten the traditionally lengthy underwriting and claim processes. So that's why, you know, this is my little tip. If you want a cheaper insurance policy, you can go to those digital insurers. Usually they tend to be cheaper because of the lower cost structures. So here at Singapore Exchange, maybe I should also share what are some of the exciting things I'm working on. We at Singapore Exchange, we provide digital platforms and solutions for different types of investors. So for, let's say, individual securities and stock investors, mostly here in Singapore, we offer a one-stop in what we call investor portal for investors to analyze their portfolio and make smarter investment decisions. So we also operate certain things like OTC markets for certain derivatives and fixed income products for professional or institutional investors. So there are, you know, lots of new technologies emerging every day, like personalization I just mentioned, and also things like distributed ledger technology, which is the underlying technology of blockchain and whatnot to facilitate training and clearing workflows, which has been adopted in some of our platforms and communications. But as a matter of fact, even though I've mentioned some of the successful and exciting, you know, patterns in both finance and also in the hospitality/casino industry, I must say that digital transformation is still yet to reach a widespread adoption. So what I have observed over the years is actually it's been mostly restricted to big players with deeper pockets, unfortunately, at least in certain industry like travel and tourism. So in my opinion, there are certain significant hurdles to successful adoption of digital transformation. In my view, these hurdles mostly revolve around the lack of bigger picture. What I mean by that is probably the million-dollar question. You know, your CEO or CFO usually asks is all about ROI. So some of the questions that every day I answer, like, you know, whether it's financially justifiable and whether it will really create better customer experience. And if it does it really translate into more top line, more bottom line, or both? Any legal and compliance implications, such as data privacy, that will come into play. And what happens to the legacy systems? Because, you know, that applies to most of our existing businesses. We have lots of legacy systems. So sometimes, you know, innovation requires some trial and error, unfortunately, and we have to take the risk. But really, unfortunately, not every organization has the vision. And most importantly, what I see is patient to wait. So not to mention the internal capacity. So things will become even more complicated when digital transformation or innovation is overlaid with internal politics, I have to say. We've got to remember that, you know, transformation to some extent also means a fundamental change to the existing operating models. And there is always someone who will criticize you and wants to slow you down, especially those, what we call in Singapore, you know, those old uncles, you know, they try to slow you down. No offense, by the way. So a few days ago, I gave another presentation on a similar topic at a different forum. One of the question was, you know, quite interesting, was actually the qualities to be a digital head, you know, driving such a transformation and innovation. So my answer was, you know, besides hard skills, hard technical skills and business acumen, very importantly, I think there are two key things over the years I think I should hone a little bit better. Is actually first is financial skills. Financial skills will help us validate things more effectively. And the second one is definitely political knowledge, because having a better political knowledge will help us navigate the internal powers. And most importantly, the decision-making process to make things more effectively towards our goals. So up to this point, you may wonder how we can start or improve digital transformation journey, right? I can see some of the questions are coming in. Especially if your business is actually in a traditional industry. So I get asked a lot every time I speak at the different forums. But first, I have actually a three golden rules. I always say in different forums. My first rule is actually to put your customers and customer journey in the middle and think about how you can use a digital means to solve a problem or create new value. The definition here of customer is not necessarily restricted to external customer. It can also mean internal, because in most cases, any transformation often requires internal process enhancements as well, right? If I want to use Rob's example, Rob's company, Yapster, unfortunately, he's not online now. I guess the underlying problem that he's trying to solve is the communication gap within a hotel between the back of house and front of house while being still compliant. This is my problem, my understanding. So when you put your customer in the middle and see through all the different interactions and processes in a blueprint, then you can identify areas that you can automate and streamline and simply do things better. My second advice or golden rule is actually do not jump directly into the specific solution for the sake of digital transformation, and don't be misled by the buzzwords. What I mean by that is actually, I often hear people saying things like, oh, all right, my digital strategy is that I have an app, I have a website, I have my email marketing, I've done my social media. Therefore, I have got my digital strategy. Or even sometimes I hear people hopping on some buzzwords like, okay, I've been exploring like AI, blockchain, all these new technologies. It should be very clear that adopting digital channels isn't the same as having digital strategy, nor digital transformation. And using the latest technologies don't mean that it's a killer strategy either. So we need to really understand what it means to the customer before we think about the solution. My third and last advice is actually never aim to build a monster. This is actually the biggest mistake I've always made in my life. Always think agile and be agile. I think it's not difficult to understand as things may change along the journey, right? When you start to see things, things can be a bit more complicated than you think. But another critical reason is that in the political corporate world, we often need to defend and protect our territory before we can deliver something. And in order for us to get things done more effectively. So I've seen many amazing digital projects, from many different industries and many different companies, both in the US, in the UK, and even in China, which unfortunately didn't last very long, solely because of the lack of stakeholder buy-in. Okay. But thinking and being agile doesn't mean that you can lose sight of the bigger picture. So don't get me wrong. Rather, you need to really communicate the bigger picture and keep communicating with a stakeholder and put things into different phases. And of course, keep monitoring the processes and results so that you get ready for reporting and also being challenged by others, you can defend. Okay, before I end the presentation and take some of the questions, maybe I should share my view on the digital transformation in the next few years, because I often get asked this question a lot every time when I speak at some of the forums. I mean, from a macro perspective, in retrospect, if you look at like the past 10 to 15 years, we have in fact gone through a massive digitalization already. Look at the different industries, right? And even with the pandemic, undoubtedly given it a boost across many industries and companies. Trying to see, many of us, even myself, are still working from home, buying from home, shopping from home, eating from home, and investing from home, right? And with the trends I just mentioned earlier, like AI, machine learning, the DLT or distributed ledger technology, or even Internet of Things, IoTs, they will continue to become more mature in the next few years, I believe. So therefore, our work processes and service offerings will simply become smarter and smarter, in my view. So I would say we are officially ushering in a truly smart era with more models, trying to sort of consolidating the existing technologies and resources probably in the next 10 years or so. And this is fundamentally what Meta is all about. If you ask me, it's not anything like rocket science. It's basically, in my view, it's a consolidation of AR, VR, social media that Facebook has been doing, online payments, ads, everything in one big house. So, but for business, having technologies doesn't necessarily mean adoption, as cost is still a hurdle in my view, or at least in the next few years. So I do hope that to see an increasing commoditization of digital technologies and solutions, so that will make adoption of digital transformation become more economically viable and financially justifiable. So this marks the end of our presentation. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Carrel. I think we should ask Hakan, who's very curious about your studying tourism in Surrey, why you chose Surrey. They're considering another master's degree, particularly in marketing, and was asking your opinion about that.
Right. It's a very interesting question. I obtained my first degree also in tourism and hospitality when I was in my birthplace in Macau. So I joined Surrey back in 2005, largely because I attended a a seminar delivered by Professor Gang Li. That time was Dr. Gang Li. He was just a lecturer, just finished his PhD, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why I just joined Surrey. I just want to deepen my understanding of tourism study, and especially I had a particular interest in marketing. That's why I did my tourism marketing. But after after I have worked in the industry for a few years, I realized there are certain issues that I need to improve. One of which is actually the legal knowledge. And the other one is actually, as I mentioned, is the financial knowledge. For the finance one, I can easily actually pick up some books and then even watch some YouTube videos, to pick up the knowledge. But legal knowledge is something that we really need to sit in the classroom and debate with other classmates for us to pick up. That's why I sort of explore a completely new route, and I took a master's degree at the University of Edinburgh, to focus on that. And actually, it's what a coincidence. My studies at Edinburgh and also my dissertation was also about innovation. So it's about innovation and digital law. So there are a lot of issues, not just the simple ones like the privacy law or even like e-commerce and international taxation. There are even things like what are the roles of like Google, of all these platforms, because these are not just a website or search engines. All these sites have become the commodities of our everyday lives. So what are the roles of these platforms? There are lots of legal issues being debated at the legal landscape. Quite interesting. Oh, I can see Professor Lee is just texted me. All right, I hope I have answered your question.
I think the correlation and you mentioned it a few times, the justification of ROI to different stakeholders. It's such a pivotal step in innovation and in digitalization, because the stakeholders do have a controlling factor into the conversation. And having walked into hotels, I think I mentioned this to you before in 2019, where they still don't have a PMS system. That kind of made me sweat a little bit and scratch my head. But do you think, in your opinion, is there an easier way for us to justify the ROI or to justify the longevity of digitalization in our industry?
I think having the bigger picture is very important. Allow me to say this. Some of the digital practitioners that I've met in my career so far, maybe they started their career more from a technical perspective. That's why they say things, they have a lot of jargons. They try to explain how things work to the executives using their own terminology, which is actually not really, it's not really something that layman can understand. So if I have to make my humble opinions is actually, avoid using jargons and think really like running a business and having a bigger picture. It's not just having a PMS or something, not just having an app, but rather what are the values you are trying to unlock after having these tools? If you put everything together, let's say if we have a proper PMS and if we have an app, basically we can cut down the number of the manpower in the front office technically, and then we can improve the efficiency by how many. There are certain things we need to quantify. That's why doing a master's degree or even PhD at Surrey is such a great brilliant idea, because these are some of the knowledge that I learned in my program. We need to really quantify things and see things more strategically. Yeah.
Your professor has a question for you. I'll leave you to read the question from Gang.
Okay. Future development of AI-based digital innovation and customer experience management. In fact, I think it's a very interesting question. We know that data privacy is actually a very important issue, and it's an issue that we cannot miss. We have got the GDPR in Europe, and now even after Brexit, the last time I read the law is actually the UK has retained the GDPR largely, and then trying to modify a little bit. But fundamentally, if you look at technology or technical or digital transformation, it's actually nothing wrong about it. And data is nothing wrong about it. It's a very effective tool for us to enhance experience. So in my view, I think being compliant is one thing, but most importantly for tourism organizations or even any companies, the real issue in the next few years or in the future is actually how we can improve trust, customer trust in sort of disclosing data and using your services. Because if you look at some of the models, I hate to say this, but some of the models in China, for example, like those Taobao or those online e-commerce sites, there are lots of innovation on that front that try to merge the different data together. Whether or not they are compliant is another issue, but at least all this data, when they are put together, will truly unlock a new value for businesses and customer alike. So, my short answer to that is actually, I think the legal landscape is actually watching and also evolving. But most importantly, is that businesses need to build the trust for the customers and also consumers to trust the service, so that consumers can actually give more data and to consent to disclose more data for better tracking and to empower the overall service experience.
Thank you for that. And then finally, I believe Hakan will be connecting with you directly through LinkedIn
Sure.
to ask for some
Happy to
advice
do that.
about a future master's. I think Hakan, we're going to likely see you soon on campus from what I'm reading, which is lovely to see. From a personal perspective, I loved the casino demographic analysis and targeted marketing, and I think the link with revenue management and expanding on that, I think it would be amazing. But from a
it's actually a very, how should I say, it was one of the best experiences that I've ever learned in my life, throughout the past 10 years. But I must say that even in the casino world, there are a lot of issues on that front, because one of the biggest things, which is not a secret, I've seen a lot of literature mentioning about it, is actually the data silos. Data silos continues to be an issue, and there are a lot of companies trying to pool the different data to build up something called data lake, but the investment is actually enormous. There is actually a casino operator in Macau, which I don't want to name here, but I know they have invested a lot of money, and they have hired the best scientists, data scientists from the US, to build up that particular function. But after 5 or 6 years, still no success or very little success. So there are certain things that we need to keep doing. But I think there are certain things that we have to accept that. Because data science will continue to be an issue, and I hope that when AI and all the new technology, emerging technology, and then also the cloud computing will become more mature, things will become easier in the future.
Let's hope so. If there's no other questions, thank you so much, Carrel. Thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your invaluable experiences and knowledge. And I can't wait to see you taking your third master's degree, and I think it was philosophy. But yeah. I wanted to actually see you possibly bring your experience in finance now and take it back to hospitality maybe in the next 10 years and see where that leads to. I think there's a growth of learning journeys between the two. So thank you so much for sharing that. And if I can invite Ys for her conclusion of our webinar today, that would be fantastic.
Thank you very much, Carrel, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be communication coming from us towards Christmas to share with you all kinds of things that are happening in the school. So thank you for engaging with the school, and thank you, Sylvia, and also from the team in the advancement office for organizing this. And hopefully we will see many of you physically in the coming year or so. And we plan to continue doing the webinar. So if you do have suggestions on topics, for example, or if you're interested in speaking in future webinars, to get in touch with us. And yeah, so thanks very much, and have a great weekend ahead.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.